Today, we're going to talk about the European invasion of the Americas. It- we talked about that human migration beginning out of Africa, traversing the Asian steppes, coming across Siberia, others coming from southern Asia, and joining at the Bering Straits, and which was a land bridge for about 1,000 years, and humans followed the herds as they crossed into North America and populated North, South, and Central America. Uh, but then we've talked about, and that happens 20,000 years ago, before we discover agriculture. Then we come to the Neolithic period, 10,000 years ago, agriculture, animal husbandry. People start developing empires. We embrace the ideas of excess, wealth, power, greed. The Akkadian Empire takes place 4,350 years ago. Religion comes about. Yes, there was religion before, but the belief in monotheism and a moral code as blowback to the empires. But that competition between trying to rein in, establish some guardrails on the empires, that is ongoing, and the empires are winning. And by the time we get to 600, 700 years ago, England is battling with France to expand their empire. The Portuguese and the Spanish are asserting themselves. In Spain, Queen Isabella is fighting against Islam, fighting the Moors, which is short for the Moroccans. And so there's worldwide fighting and expansion of empire going on. We discussed what was happening in Africa. There was empires there, the Mali Empire, the Songhai Empire, and others. Muslim slave traders uprooting people from their homes and moving them across the continent from the East Coast to the West Coast for mining operations and other things like that. And so we get racialization occurs to rationalize and justify enslavement and brutality against slaves. And so we now are coming to that point. And by the way, we also talked about in the background is the Black Plague that fractures that entity of religion, that established some guardrails about empire building and enslavement, but now it's fractured, and so it is in flux. It means it'll be fluid. What can be done with slaves is about to change, and then new technology comes about, and this one navigator, Christopher Columbus, is an engineer, and he is equipped with some new tools, the navigator's astrolabe, and it's like he has the new iPhone 43 and he wants to use it. He is chafing at the bit to use it, and he's trying to get people to fund him, and he's talked to the Portuguese, and they've kind of danced around him, and he's gone to Spain, and he is trying to get an audience with Isabella and Ferdinand to see if they'll fund his escapade. And they put him on an allowance, and they keep him at bay for a while, but then they decide they're going to give him the chance to explore, which is also a chance to invade.
Once in Spain, it took Columbus about a year to win his first audience with King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella in 1486.
I'm sure he was treated like anybody pounding on the door with a crazy idea, but for some reason Isabella didn't think so. She seemed to be absolutely enraptured with Columbus. Now, this is not the first time in history this has happened. There have been all sorts of characters passed through royal courts that caught the fancy of especially some queen.
But despite Isabella's interest, the court was too busy to think about Columbus's proposal. Spain was fighting to expel the Muslim Moors, who had occupied the country for 7 centuries. But to encourage Columbus, Isabella granted him a small allowance to stay close by. Columbus was now raising a second son. The mother was a Spanish farmer's daughter whom he would never marry. Columbus survived by selling books and kept pestering the court for 7 full years.
Very stubborn and persistent. At one time, Columbus said, I plow on no matter how the winds might shake me. And he had to do that because he was following the court around, really almost like a beggar trying to sell his project.
Columbus was no favorite of the court's learned men.
The royal astronomers and the cosmographers, and they said, look, this is how big the Earth is. The Earth had been measured for years. And here comes a guy that says, you're all wrong. Everybody's wrong. You're 20% off. It's 20,000 miles around, not 25,000 miles. And believe me, well, obviously the Royal Commission going to turn him down. He was wrong.
But Columbus was able to keep his case before the court through sheer personality.
He is a good talker, even though his Spanish is not his language. His enthusiasm could break through the bounds of language. He was a very persuasive, he would have made a good salesman in today's world.
The turning point came when the Moors were finally defeated by the Spanish armies in early 1492. Now the king and queen were ready to consider the Italians' proposal.
It offered a way of catching up with their neighboring rival power, the Portuguese. The Portuguese were making all these discoveries. They were bringing back gold and slaves and tropical products and acquiring an empire, and wealth was flowing in from the empire, and Spain was not really getting anything.
He promised everything that he himself wanted: riches from the fabled East Indies, glory and fame for Spain, and the possibility of converting other peoples from other lands to become Christians.
When the king and queen expressed interest, Columbus demanded that he be made admiral of the ocean sea, viceroy of all new lands, and be given 10% of the treasure. The royals were outraged, but finally agreed. After 7 years, Columbus had won.
Columbus had won, and so he gets funding and he gets a charter to go off and sail and see what he can discover. Now, bear with me because I have to change video players and get a disc loaded in. That takes a while for that to happen, but it will happen eventually. If I get this to, there we go. So stick with me as I maneuver this. It'll take a minute, but so he gets a charter from Queen Isabella and Ferdinand, and we've been told that he is going forth to find spices, right? Okay, now I want us to do that, and come on. It is, here we go. And so we're told that he is going forth to find spices. That's what Columbus's mission was. If you read the charter from the Queen, however, nowhere does it list oregano, paprika, crushed red pepper. It tells him, go forth and conquer. So he's not, the idea that he's being sent forth to, let's see, here we go, Windows DVD player, to find spices just isn't what's there. Okay, let's see if I get this correct. Can get that one up. Survivor's Dream to Sale.
(1476), off the coast of Portugal. An Italian sailor, shipwrecked and left for dead by pirates. His name? Christopher Columbus. A dreamer who will unite a divided world. He believes he's been saved by God for a special purpose.
In certain cases, an individual makes a huge impact. And Columbus is kind of a pure example of that.
He settles in Lisbon, Portugal. With the help of his brother Bartholomew, he begins to pursue a dream.
He was a guy who had this tremendous personal ambition. He really, really wanted to pull his family up from the muck and become an aristocrat, become a gentleman.
His dream is inspired by a book written 200 years earlier, but thanks to the printing press has become a bestseller. After the Bible, the most widely read book in Europe, The Wonders of the World by Marco Polo. The epic story of a Venetian merchant in his travels east, through the Holy Lands, Central Asia, and on to the exotic teeming cities of China.
It is scarcely possible to set down in writing the magnificence of this province. Here they weave gold tissues, as well as every other kind of silk and cloth. The city contains merchants of great wealth and an incalculable number of people.
Columbus was a classic example of someone who really was inspired by literature and dreamed big.
He's possessed with this, kind of desire to win the lottery of life. He wanted to be the next Marco Polo.
Columbus's brother is a map maker. Together, they plot a revolutionary idea: to head east by traveling west. Not over land like Marco Polo, but by sea.
What a great opportunity. What a wonderful thing to be part of. When I think of it for myself, it's like, whew, you get a little frisson.
Map makers at the time know nothing about the Americas. To them, this double continent doesn't exist. They believe there's a vast, uncrossable ocean between Europe and Asia. Columbus thinks they're wrong, that the world is smaller than they realize. And it's quite easy to sail from Europe to China.
Okay, and now I need to And so Columbus has an idea. He has new technology. He's anxious to get his opportunity to use his new technology toys, and Queen Isabella has provided him with the resources to do so. This one going. On. Come back here, share screen. Okay, so let's look at the lands that he's going to.
It's 1491. A year from now, Christopher Columbus will set foot on this quiet beach. What's here before he arrives is a world of unbelievable natural wealth. Two vast continents teeming with life. More than 600,000 miles of coastline are surrounded by pristine waters. Shoals so dense, they're said to slow the passage of ships. Countless species number in the tens of millions. Inland from the Atlantic shores, great forests stretch in every direction. This new world is a land of stark contrasts. From the lush jungles of South America to the glaciers of the Arctic North and the great plains of the Midwest, where gigantic herds thunder across North America, there is room for caribou, antelope, bison, and the giant grizzly. In the sky above, flocks of birds nearly block out the sun as millions of pigeons, ducks, and geese cover the horizon. No one in Europe has dared imagine the magnificent bounty that exists on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. In 1491, Christopher Columbus stands on the coast of Spain, looking west. He dreams of leading an expedition to find a new trade route to Asia. Success will mean glory and riches for himself and the Spanish monarchy. In Europe, the nobles have grown wealthy by trading with the East. Spices and gold, gemstones and silk are the most lucrative goods. But Europeans have lost the Silk Road to the Turks, and foreign trade is in decline. The wealth of kings is in danger. Isabella, Queen of Spain, is desperate to find new routes to India, and she has a plan. Isabella is the most powerful woman in Europe, a continent of expanding horizons filled with competitive and inventive souls. For 500 years, they have been building castles, palaces, and centers of trade. Kings and popes have raised armies to fight each other and their enemies on Europe's borders. Nowhere else are rivalries so intense, gold fever so widespread, religious fervor and business expertise as tightly wound as in Europe in 1491. Ideas are moving forward. Curiosity and the thirst for power pushes Europe's limits. Europe is a busy and crowded continent trying to feed a growing population of 100 million people. Natural resources are already exploited as land becomes scarce and overworked.
And so the Europeans are fighting with each other, and 100 million people in Europe. Mind you, the land that Columbus is going to go to, we looked at the wildlife and the lushness of the natural abundance of the New World. However, there's 100 million people there too. The natives have been occupying these lands for 15 to 20,000 years. Some estimates now saying much longer than that. So let me jump ahead here.
Most of the peasants are farmers, working land that belongs to someone else's landscape. They contribute to Europe's overcrowded conditions. In 1491, the Americas, too, are a crowded and prosperous place, but in a very different way. The Andes cradled a vast empire ruled by powerful god kings. Mesoamerica is densely populated and home to the most impressive civilizations on the continent. The Atlantic coast is filled with smaller villages and fields. And along the great rivers, great cities are built around monumental plazas. It is an ancient world, inhabited by 100 million people. Hunters and gatherers, fishermen and farmers, kings, slaves and soldiers. Down among the trees, where the Missouri, Illinois, and Mississippi rivers merge, lies one of the largest civilizations on the continent. The native Mississippians are mound builders, occupying a vast region from the Great Lakes in the north to Florida in the south. The first explorers thought these great mounds were natural, carved by retreating glaciers. Now we know that they are the centerpieces of cities. Cities like Cahokia. Busy trading posts of earth and wood, with populations of up to thousands of people. No one knows what they called themselves or what language they spoke. But we know why they were successful. These Mississippians are farmers. Their staple crop is fuel for the ever-growing population. It is a plant native to the Americas, unknown to the rest of the world. But corn is not a blessing from nature or a gift of the gods. This crop is the outcome of man's first feat of genetic engineering. Once they learned how to grow it, they could stay in one place. This simple diet translated straight into the energy to build a civilization.
It's important to note that the way the Neolithic period emerged, as we talked about it in the cradle of civilization, it also emerges in the Americas. So what we had as, let me stop that share. Oh, I did have it right. What we had was, agriculture took root in the cradle of civilization. Then, if you recall, when we were watching Guns, Germs, and Steel, we could see that this phenomenon, this technology of agriculture spread out east and west. And so it moves into the Americas, and the natives adopt agricultural practices, even getting to the point of genetic engineering, creating corn. So these are sophisticated societies. Let's have another look at them.
Just outside St. Louis on the banks of the Mississippi is a giant hill.
Okay. For some reason, this is sticking, so I'm going to try to call it up again and see if I can't get it working better than it is right now. Let's see if I can do it this way. Take that out of there and come back to here. Let's see if this works a little better. That there.
Kind of replica of what the gods wanted on Earth.
At the intersection of modern scholarship and native knowledge is a new vision of America and the people who built it. This is Native America. Just outside St. Louis on the banks of the Mississippi is a giant hill. It doesn't appear to be that unusual, except that this is one of the flattest areas in North America. So what's this mound doing here? The Choctaw people have some answers. Their ancestors are mound builders.
This was built a long time ago by a whole bunch of people whose blood runs through my veins now. And that is a powerful thing, to feel that energy.
It is a place where people have a sense of being, people have a sense of belonging, where somebody came from. It's a portal to looking to the past.
A 1,000 years ago, Native Americans pile earth by the basket load to construct one of the largest mounds in the world. It towers over 10 stories high. Its base covers an area larger than 10 football fields. And it's flanked by over 100 other mounds. They are part of a bustling city with temples and palaces, markets and plazas, sports fields and thousands of homes. In the year 1100, 30,000 people live here. That's more than London at the time. This is Cahokia.
Cahokia would have been an ancient New York City. It would have been fully inhabited with thousands of people, potentially speaking different dialects or different languages.
It's as big as most other early city complexes anywhere in the world, from China to Egypt to South America.
Who built Cahokia is a mystery. But other mound-building cultures, like the Choctaw, believe mounds have a spiritual power connected to the sky.
The mounds were built so that we could be closer to the Creator.
It's that connection with the Creator. We strived for the sky.
Get some data points over in this region.
New research is revealing Cahokia's sky connection is built right into the city.
That line there is the end of it. These buildings are almost all celestially aligned.
And there are even more connections to the sky. A large ring of cedar posts, similar to England's Stonehenge. Human sacrifices, carefully timed to a celestial event. And sculptures of goddesses evoking ancient legends of the sky. The mystery of Cahokia is part of something much larger going on across the Americas. From the very origins of Native America, over 10,000 years ago, peoples across both continents are fixated on the sky. The Maya, the Inca, the Aztec, all build cities inspired by, aligned to, and synchronized with the cosmos. Why go?
And it's important for me to say that, remember, these are the people that we call savages. And, you know, these are fairly sophisticated societies. Let me get to our next. Let's have a look at 40s.
Many are illiterates.
20.
It is the summer of 1492. He promises the Queen that his expedition will be a success. And in a matter of weeks, he will change the course of history. It is October 12, 1492, when Columbus sights land. I saw neither sheep nor goats nor any other beast. All the trees were as different from ours as day from night, and so the herbage, the rocks, and all things. 3 Spanish ships sail west for 3 months in search of India. Then finally they arrive, 87 men, among them conquistadors, pig farmers, murderers. But this is not Asia. It is an island in the Caribbean. They have no idea that they have come to a new world. The air is hot. The water is warm. They have survived the voyage and have found land for the Spanish crown and in the name of God. They are exhausted, tired, but thankful. What land is this? Where are the ports, the cities, the ships and traders they expected? The natives have seen many people arrive from the sea, other tribes, but no one like this.
Cintak wa alok, suku analok pura, hakape alok uci.
They will both soon discover that this is just the beginning. Columbus and his men stay for 3 months in the Bahamas and have no idea that they're on the edge of 2 great continents, about 10 times bigger than Europe. From the tropical seas to the arid deserts, it is vast. And there is space, with room for every possible landscape, stretching from the northernmost to almost the southernmost points of the globe. Spain's royal monarchy made Columbus's voyage possible. It is 1493, and they've waited eagerly for 7 months to learn of his discoveries. Upon his return, he delivers the news in a report to Queen Isabella. In a few pages, Columbus describes the paradise he has found in her name. Land to conquer, converts for Christianity, riches to exploit, and gold.
And so the representatives of the 100 million in Europe have now arrived in the lands that are occupied by the 100 million in the Americas. I have let me make sure I get the right one here, episode 3. I have a longer clip that I want to show you because I think it captures what becomes the invasion. Make sure I have this up properly. Share that one. Share.
How much damage, how many calamities, disruptions and devastations of kingdoms have there been? How many souls have perished in the Indies over the years, and how unjustly? How many unforgivable sins have been committed? Bartolomé de las Casas.
In December of 1492.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to highlight that Las Casas was part of Columbus's expedition, and he documents what happens. So when we talk about the genocide and all of that occurred with Columbus, it's documented by Columbus. So
3 ships under the command of Christopher Columbus approached the second largest island in the Caribbean. For 8 weeks, Columbus had traveled from the Bahamas to Cuba, finally reaching the site of modern-day Haiti and the Dominican Republic. The island he would name Hispaniola. The island was then populated by people known as the Taino. One region was controlled by the paramount chief, Wakanagari. On Christmas Eve, while coasting along the shore, Columbus's flagship, the Santa Maria, ran aground.
When Wakanagari learned the news, he sent all his people from the town with many large canoes to unload everything from the ship. So great was the care and diligence which that king exercised, and he himself was as diligent unloading the ship as in guarding what was taken to land, in order that everything would be well cared for.
Grateful for the island leader's help, Columbus accepted his invitation to come ashore.
The admiral left to dine on shore and arrived at the time when 5 kings had come, all subject to the one who is called Wakanagari. Wakanagari came to receive the admiral as soon as he had reached land and took him by the arm.
Columbus was immediately struck by the beauty of Taino life.
The king observes a very wonderful estate in such a dignified manner that it is a pleasure to see. Neither better people nor land can there be. The houses and the villages are so pretty. They love their neighbors as themselves. And they have the sweetest speech in the world. And they're gentle, and they're always laughing. Christopher Columbus.
As a token of gratitude for the rescue of his men and supplies, Columbus presented Wakanagari with a red cape, a prestigious item among the Taino elite. In return, Wakanagari gave Columbus a golden tiara he wore on his head. To Wakanagari, it was a fair exchange, a gesture of mutual respect and recognition, the opening of trade between equals. To Columbus, it was a crown, a symbol of authority. Wakanagari was surrendering his lands and people to Spain. But Columbus was not simply looking to rule people. He saw something much more valuable to his future. He saw gold, the prize he could take back to his sponsors in Europe. There was wealth to be had, and to the Europeans of the time, wealth belonged to those strong enough to take it.
Now, I have ordered my men to build a tower and a fort. Not that I believe it to be necessary, for it is obvious that with these men that I bring, I could subdue all of this island, since the people are naked and without arms. But it is right that this tower be made, so that with love and fear, they will obey.
Leaving behind a contingent of men in a fort built from the timbers of the Santa Maria, Columbus set sail for Europe. With him, he would carry the news of a new world, gold and docile island natives. Wakanagari and the Taino had no way of knowing what was about to happen to their ancient way of life. The Taino's ancestors were part of a series of migrations of South American Indian people dating back over 2,000 years. They farmed the land and harvested the wealth of the sea. Taino traders traveled in huge ocean-going canoes capable of carrying up to 150 men. Boats laden with feathers, gold, wood, pottery, beautiful birds, cotton fabric, and food. Island nations were woven together by trade. Trade was the communication system by which nations knew one another and maintained peace. Some trading partners even exchanged their names to create lasting bonds between their communities. By the time of contact, there were well over 1 million people living in the Caribbean. Local community leaders were subject to powerful regional leaders like Wakanagari, who controlled trade with large personal fleets and warehouses of commodities. Into this world, Columbus returned in November 1493 with a military flotilla of 17 ships. Under his command were armor-clad soldiers, mounted cavalry, attack dogs, and guns. The Spanish conquest of the Caribbean began. Gold mines were opened, and the Taino were enslaved, forced to mine the ore. A Spanish priest, Bartolomé de las Casas, who accompanied Columbus on his second voyage, spoke out against the cruel treatment of the Taino people.
It is not possible to recount the 100th part of what I have seen with my own eyes. A man had need to have a body of iron to undergo the labor they endure in getting gold out of the mines. They must delve and search 100 times over in the inner parts of the mountains till they dig them down from top to bottom. They must work the very rocks hollow. Bartolomé de las Casas.
Epidemics and famine swept the island. Yet the Spanish continued to demand that the beleaguered Taino supply them with both food and labor. Garrisons were strung across the island to fortify the gold fields. When resistance sprang up, Columbus sent out military units to terrorize towns into submission.
They were so relentlessly persecuted and pursued with their wives and children up into the hills, so tired, hungry, and harassed. And there went with them disease, death, and misery, just as if they had been killed in the wars. They died of hunger and sickness that surrounded them, and the fatigue and oppression that followed. After 1496, no more than a third remained of the multitudes that had been on the island.
Taino suffering was so severe that thousands took their own lives rather than submit.
Wherefore many went to the woods and there hanged themselves, after having killed their children, saying it was far better to die than to live so miserably. Some threw themselves from the high cliffs down precipices. Others jumped into the sea, and others starved themselves to death. Benzoni, soldier for Spain.
Some escaped into the mountains, including Wakanagari, the paramount chief who had befriended Columbus. He soon died, a homeless wanderer. By 15...
And that's what we call bringing civilization to the savages. In subsequent Spanish incursions, they brought with them dogs that were trained to salivate at the sight of babies. Okay, with that, we can open up for discussion. That's what I wanted to show you about the Columbus opening the path into the New World. And as we, get set up to have a discussion, I want to say that next week we are going to look at what became the legal and moral foundation for invading the Americas, the Doctrine of Discovery.
So people can turn on their videos again and use the raise the hand function to ask questions or make comments or whatever. And we'll start with Margita. Oh, can you unmute?
Yes.
Okay.
Do scientists know? Well, probably not, but I find it peculiar or very interesting that agriculture was, so to speak, invented on both sides of the ocean, in the Americas as well as in Eurasia, Africa. And I cannot imagine that it has anything to do with the human brain, all of a sudden, like, a little time bomb going off and saying, hey, let's do this or try this. Is there any evidence that perhaps the latest immigration of Asians into the Americas brought the idea of agriculture already with them, or what do you know?
Well, sure. Remember, this is happening over thousands of years. So humans first start leaving Africa 80,000 years ago. But agriculture doesn't come about until about 10,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. But there are people connections that have emerged out of Africa into Asia, into what becomes Russia and Siberia, into Europe. So the technologies that emerged in the cradle of civilization have spread out. And certainly there is a path from the cradle of civilization into across the Bering Straits into the North America. And so those thoughts may very well have found their way through that path.
Okay.
Just as humans are kind of like a virus that continues to mutate, so is technology. It's an idea that can spreads, mutates, and it turns up in all places. Yeah.
Nancy.
Well, I've made several trips to Mexico and Panama and places like that. And I still see a lot of people around that appear to be descendants of Mayans and Aztecs and so forth, or at least going by appearance, and some of their cultural rituals that they still have today. So I'm assuming that some of this barbaric action in the Caribbean on the islands changed, the format of it changed by the time they got over to the continents.
Changed in what way? No, the brutality continued. The techniques that were used by Columbus were picked up by Cortez and Pizarro and many others. They continue. The conquistadors, that spread Spain. Spain is really the first to traverse the North American continent, and you find they travel all the way to Canada. So, and the techniques that they use didn't change.
Well, I mean, they're not wiped out, completely wiped out, say in Central America, like over in the Caribbean islands. The native.
No, what you had is really the native population. The most recent estimate that I had was 140 million people. And what you then had is a tremendous collapse of that society, of those people. And then you had the Europeans really come to dominate the land, and the native population continues to shrink over thousands of years now. And remember, what we're talking about 500 years. Over that 500-year period, the native population fits what would be a genocide. And so they're under attack. It's the only way that the Europeans were able to take control over the land was to, kill them. That's what they did. So it's a genocide. And not just in North America. Remember a lot of what you had moving into, Central America and South America are people forced off of these lands and pushed south. But the Spanish invaded and the Portuguese invaded South America just as much as they did on the islands.
Well, you still see some descendants around in Central America, South America, whereas on the islands in the Caribbean, you hardly ever see any of the Mayans, Aztecs, and so forth there. They all look like they are all from right off the boat from Spain. So they got rid of more people there. By the time they got over to the basic continents in Central and South America, maybe they had changed their MO so that they weren't just wiping out like they were over there. I don't know, but you've got descendants one place and you got no descendants in another place.
Were there better places to hide though on the mainland?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Nancy, in the islands, no place to go. And in the Americas, they could at least escape.
Yeah.
So it's not that they weren't persecuted or killed. It's just that some did get away.
The Spanish were forcing people to work in mines to try to extract gold. What they found was silver. So working in the silver mines was a death sentence. And so, it was constantly having to replace people because they would die in the process. It was a pretty brutal existence. Yeah.
The fact that they were.
But it's important for you to recognize that what existed were sophisticated, advanced societies, and we have rationalized the genocide on the basis of they were savages and we brought them civilization, and that was collateral damage. That's nonsense. Mm-hmm.
It's just so horrible to hear that how many people killed themselves as well, because they were just so this rule was so horrible.
Again, mind you, the phenomenon of property, greed, all of that is over a 10,000 year period of the human existence. And so it has become expanded upon, refined. The mechanisms for warfare have become greater. The Spanish come with these iron shields that shocked the natives because they had never seen anything like that. Same with horses. They hadn't seen horses. So they're like, this is just something that is Star Wars. So the mechanisms for warfare have become greater. The thirst for ever greater wealth and power is insatiable by 500 years ago. And if you remember, I put up a timeline in the first class to show that the Native Americans were here for 20,000 years. Yes, they had fights between themselves, but nothing along the lines of what happens when the Europeans invade. This is sheer brutality, and it is horrific. And this is only over the past 500 years. So these people who had an existence over a very long period of time may have felt that they lived in a stable, secure society. Suddenly it erupts, and there's a huge change. So when you look at people today, where they're aggressive, invading a country, mind you, they think that they can take something that's been in existence for 10, 20,000 years, and by the force of their aggression, they can turn it on a dime. And indeed, what happens in the Americas changes the existence of the Native Americas on a dime. And so their world is totally upended. Yeah, it's 500 years, but right now, what was a population of 140 million people is now a very small, contained number of people, operating some casinos here and there and that kind of thing. So it's important to see that change. We are invaders. We are occupiers of lands that we didn't migrate here. The difference that I make is that the distinction I want to make is that the Native American came here following nature. They followed herds. They followed food sources. They weren't invading. They didn't define any boundaries. They just went where food went. Columbus and his people, Queen Isabella, then followed by the Portuguese and others, they were invading to take over lands that were occupied by other people.
Kay, you have a question?
Yes. I see that migrations always talk about coming down through Alaska and Western US. Was migration then spread east across what became the US, or was there migration on the East Coast too?
No, what happens is they come across the Bering Straits, Beringia, and that, the ice has receded, and so there's 1,000 miles where people live in what is now covered by water, but they live there and they traverse into North America. They come down the east side of the Colorado Rockies. Mm-hmm. And there are some who go by boat from what would be Washington State along the Pacific coast and may come up into Mexico and in that route. So they come in different, they move around in different ways. But yeah, and they continue spreading down to Central America and then South America.
And east then.
Right.
Okay,
right.
Just curious, yeah.
Right.
Thanks.
Was corn just a North American crop, or was that found in other places as well?
No, I believe it was the genetic engineering took place in North America.
So
and
it's
that's
just
where
here.
corn emerges. Mm-hmm. And becomes a staple crop for the Native Americans, right?
And all those wild horses that we think of as kind of native to the land weren't originally native to the land either.
Right, that's correct. But it's important to recognize, Andrew Jackson says, we have to move you because, we live an agriculture life and you don't. What are you talking about? I mean, they've lived an agriculture life for thousands of years, but this is again rationalization and justification for raw brutality. And
all of the nations have lived the same kind of thing. Were they all agricultural, or were some agricultural and some were?
No, some were hunter gatherers. Some stayed as hunter gatherers. for a long period of time. And there are still hunter-gatherer societies today within the Indian population that you may find in South America and Central America. Traveling the Amazon, you can find some primitive societies there. Yeah.
Oh, we keep finding people in the Amazon, for that matter.
Right.
That have been there forever.
Right.
Who else has a question or comment?
Okay, well, it's actually it's a good thing that we have everybody, kind of stunned with this because I have a washing machine being delivered today between 5 and 7. Between 5 and 7, they're going to deliver it. But they just told me we'll be there in about 25 minutes.
So we should wrap this up.
Go figure. Well, but before we go though, I want you to know next week we're going to talk about the doctrine of discovery, which is very important. It is the reason you own the property that you live on today. That is what gives the legal foundation for it. And you need to know where it comes from. And so we're going to talk about that. In the spring semester, when we start up again, next week will be our last class of this series. But in the second series of classes, we're going to talk about the genocide of the Native Americans. But I also want you to learn about the ancestors of the people who were attacking the US government on January 6th. Because the root of it goes into the Enclosure Acts and the Transportation Acts in England in the 16 and 1700s. So we're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about the Highland clearances. These are people in Scotland who were kicked off of their lands, and they were then sent to North America. And by the way, the mountain range in Scotland at one time was contiguous to the mountain range of the Appalachians. And it's really through tectonic shifts and that sort of stuff, when the earth breaks up, that mountain range becomes the mountain range of the Appalachians, but it was connected to the mountain range in Scotland. So when the people from the Highland clearances and from Ireland were displaced, the Scots-Irish were displaced, were kicked out by the British Empire, where did they reside? The Appalachian Mountains. So we're going to talk about them. We're also going to talk about the roots of white supremacy. How did that emerge? And how did that get into North America? We're going to talk about the roots of that. And so as we get into our, just to let you know what's coming up next, is that really to look at the things around us today that we go, that we want to understand as problems, is to understand they have deep historical roots. And it's imperative that you understand them so you can understand what's happening today. Okay.
Well, let's everybody give Sal a little
thank you very much
applause. And we want to thank you for coming, and we'll see you soon.
We'll see.